confidence is often misunderstood as something that must be built, something that must be constructed carefully over time, something that must be protected once it is finally achieved, something that can easily be lost if mistakes occur. Because confidence is often treated as part of identity, it can feel fragile. If confidence becomes connected to how someone sees themselves, then every experience begins to feel like it is confirming or threatening that image. Success appears to strengthen identity. Difficulty appears to weaken it. Approval appears to support identity. Criticism appears to challenge it. And slowly, confidence becomes less about participation in life and more about maintaining a picture of oneself. This creates subtle pressure, because the image must be protected. The image must be maintained. The image must be reinforced. The image must avoid contradiction. The image must avoid failure. The image must avoid situations that might expose uncertainty. When confidence becomes tied to self-image, exploration becomes more limited. Risk begins to feel personal. Learning begins to feel dangerous. Experimentation begins to feel uncomfortable, because each new situation appears to carry the possibility of disrupting the image that has been built. But confidence does not naturally originate from image. Confidence develops through interaction, through participation, through experience, through discovering, repeatedly, that life continues responding even when everything is not perfectly known. Confidence grows when the nervous system becomes familiar with uncertainty and discovers that uncertainty is survivable. Not always comfortable, but workable. Confidence is not the absence of uncertainty. Confidence is the willingness to remain engaged while uncertainty exists. Self-image often attempts to eliminate uncertainty before participation occurs. But participation itself is what allows confidence to develop. This creates a paradox. The mind often wants confidence before participation, but participation is what produces confidence. And when confidence is treated as a prerequisite for movement, movement becomes restricted. The situations that could naturally develop confidence are avoided because confidence is believed to be required first. When this loop becomes visible, something begins to shift. Confidence is no longer treated as something that must be fully established before engaging with life. Confidence becomes something that develops through engagement with life, through attempting, through adjusting, through continuing, through discovering that imperfection does not prevent movement, through discovering that mistakes are not permanent definitions, through discovering that learning occurs naturally when participation continues. Self-image tends to freeze confidence into a static object, something to hold, something to maintain, something to defend. But living intelligence is dynamic. It adapts, it evolves, it refines, it expands through use. Confidence that is connected to identity often requires reinforcement. Confidence that develops through participation often requires only continued engagement. One does not need to feel completely confident in order to begin. Confidence often grows quietly through doing, through discovering that capability expands through use, through discovering that learning accelerates when pressure decreases, through discovering that uncertainty becomes more manageable with familiarity, through discovering that discomfort does not prevent function, through discovering that clarity often appears through movement rather than before it. Many people can recognize moments in their lives where they acted before feeling fully confident. And often, those moments became turning points, not because everything went perfectly, but because something important became visible. Capability was larger than expected. Adaptability was stronger than expected. Learning was faster than expected. Resilience was greater than expected. Self-image often underestimates capability because it attempts to predict performance without allowing experience to contribute new information. Direct experience often reveals possibilities that thought alone could not anticipate. Confidence without self-image is less concerned with maintaining a consistent picture of oneself. It is more interested in responding intelligently to what is present. This creates flexibility, because identity does not need to be preserved in a fixed form. Growth does not need to be justified. Change does not need to be defended. Learning does not need to be hidden. Mistakes do not need to be concealed. Adjustment becomes easier when identity is not being protected. Correction becomes faster when mistakes are not interpreted as personal threats. Feedback becomes useful when it is not filtered through self-judgment. Confidence becomes more stable when it is not dependent on constant success. Because confidence is no longer built on avoiding difficulty. Confidence is built on navigating difficulty. It becomes grounded in experience rather than imagination. It becomes practical rather than conceptual. It becomes functional rather than performative. Self-image often attempts to create a stable definition of who someone is, but life itself is constantly changing. Roles change, skills develop, understanding evolves, interests shift, circumstances update. Identity that attempts to remain fixed often creates friction with a reality that is fluid. Confidence that is not attached to image can move with change, can adapt, it can update, can expand, can refine. It does not require consistency of persona in order to function. It requires responsiveness. Responsiveness to context. Responsiveness to new information. Responsiveness to growth. Responsiveness to learning. Confidence becomes less about proving something and more about participating fully. Participation does not require perfection. Participation requires presence. Presence allows awareness. Awareness allows adjustment. Adjustment allows improvement. Improvement allows confidence to deepen naturally. Confidence that is not tied to image does not need to announce itself. It does not need to appear impressive. It does not need to appear certain. It does not need to appear strong. It functions quietly. It allows questions when questions are useful. It allows learning when learning is needed. It allows correction when correction improves direction. It allows uncertainty when uncertainty is present. There is no need to pretend certainty when certainty is not available. Honesty becomes easier when image is not being maintained. Curiosity becomes easier when identity is not being defended. Collaboration becomes easier when being right is not required. Growth becomes easier when mistakes are not treated as personal failures. Self-image often divides experience into success and failure, but participation reveals something more nuanced. Everything becomes information. Everything contributes to understanding. Everything refines skill. Everything supports adaptation. Even difficulty becomes useful. Confidence begins to feel more like familiarity than achievement. Familiarity with learning. Familiarity with adjustment. Familiarity with continuing. Familiarity with navigating change. Familiarity with discovering that life does not stop when uncertainty appears. Familiarity with discovering that clarity develops through interaction. Familiarity with discovering that capability expands through participation. Confidence without self-image allows movement without constant evaluation. It allows expression without constant monitoring. It allows engagement without constant comparison. Comparison often reinforces image because it measures performance against external standards. But intelligence expresses itself in many forms. Different strengths develop in different environments. Different skills emerge under different conditions. Different perspectives contribute in different ways. Confidence that is not constructed through comparison becomes more resilient, because it is not dependent on being better than others. It is not dependent on appearing impressive. It is not dependent on maintaining superiority. It is grounded in participation itself. Participation provides continuous feedback. Continuous feedback supports continuous improvement. Continuous improvement reinforces confidence. The cycle becomes self-sustaining. Confidence no longer needs to be forced. It develops as a natural result of engagement. Confidence without self-image does not mean passivity. It often allows greater effectiveness, because energy is not being used to maintain persona. Energy becomes available for attention. Attention improves performance. Performance improves understanding. Understanding improves responsiveness. Responsiveness improves results. Results reinforce confidence. Confidence deepens through use. The need to appear confident often creates tension. Tension restricts fluidity. Fluidity supports effectiveness. Effectiveness supports trust in one's ability to respond. Trust allows relaxation. Relaxation allows clarity. Clarity allows intelligent movement. Movement provides feedback. Feedback refines direction. Confidence grows, all without requiring identity to remain fixed. Confidence without self-image allows change without loss. Because identity is not the source of stability. Participation is the source of stability. Participation continues even as circumstances evolve. Participation continues even as roles shift. Participation continues even as understanding deepens. Participation continues even as perspective changes. Confidence becomes less about who someone is and more about how life is being met. Life is being met directly, honestly, adaptively, continuously. Confidence becomes less about appearance and more about responsiveness. Less about performance and more about participation. Less about certainty and more about willingness. Willingness to continue learning. Willingness to continue adjusting. Willingness to continue engaging. Willingness to continue growing. Self-image may still appear from time to time. It may still offer familiar patterns. It may still attempt to define who someone is, but it no longer needs to determine what is possible. What is possible continues revealing itself through participation. Confidence grows quietly through this process, not because everything is known, but because learning continues. Not because mistakes disappear, but because mistakes become workable. Not because uncertainty is eliminated, but because uncertainty becomes familiar territory. Confidence without self-image allows life to continue expressing itself more freely. And expression continues revealing capability that identity alone could never fully predict. Participation is enough, and participation is already happening.